Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, welcome back to part 3 and our final part of our application of the rapid expansion with pass-through warehouse strategy to the gold rush scenario. So we've gone back to the gold rush scenario and we're playing it now following the principles that we laid out in our recent video about rapid expansion combined with pass-through warehouses. And we are in wonderful shape. We've grown Carson City to 100,000. We've completed everything in the first 6 tasks except for the alcohol, and we're in great shape on that. We've got alcohol at level 3 in Sacramento being produced and sold, and we're going to keep an eye on that. We've got a good 2-city cluster down here with a pass-through warehouse down LA and San Diego. It is starting to be well supplied, and we're growing. As you can see right here, San Diego is growing, is just past the 20,000 barrier. It starts really small. And one of the key things we want to do now, we've run wheat down there, and now we want to buy the meat industry in San Diego for the sole purpose of destroying it and replacing it with a brewery so that we'll have a meat beer line between LA and San Diego, because LA has a meat industry that is well supplied. We've run cattle into LA, so we've got that covered. Now we just need to put beer in there so those two can take off. And you can see our distillery is doing just fine in Sacramento, and it's selling its goods off to Carson City. So we're just trying to get enough money here to purchase the meat industry in San Diego. That's the key thing for down here. We've got to have meat and beer. And everything down there, LA, San Diego, even over to Yuma and Tucson and up to Kingman, up a little north or east, I guess, northeast, they are all meat industries. So we've got to get a beer down there somewhere or ship beer to them. And the easiest way to do that is just simply to buy this meat industry. There we go. We bought it. Now we'll have to save up enough money. We're going to see how much it costs to demolish it, and we're going to save up enough funds. We see that what our brewery costs. We need that cost plus the demolition costs before we want to actually demolish, so that we make sure that in the time that we're waiting to regain the money to build it, the private investor can go in and put something else in there that we don't want, and then we'd have to buy it again. So we're trying to accumulate a little capital so we can do that little demolish and rebuild of the meat industry, turn it into brewery. And otherwise, we're pretty good. We're going to run milk into our warehouse, but we've already got logs, we've got corn, we've got fruit, we've got sugar, we've got logs. So we're just hooking up the milk to run in on that line with the logs. And it'll pass through San Diego, but not stop there. It'll pass through and go to the warehouse to deliver milk into the warehouse. So now we've got logs, milk, wheat, those 3 coming in from down here on the south. And then up to the north we have corn and sugar and fruit. So now we'll have a very well supplied raw materials warehouse, a pass-through warehouse between LA and San Diego. That's going to promote growth for both of those cities. And then once we get the beer meat thing going, those 2 cities are going to take off for us. And you may have noticed as I was kind of teeing up this episode, kind of catching us up, I was up there poking around looking at Salt Lake City, and I was looking at Salt Lake City and the surrounding areas. And here we go. Now we're going to put the brewery into San Diego. And once we have that up and running, we're going to be set down here. We're going to upgrade it to level 2. And now we're rocking and rolling, because we've got the meat beer going down here. We've got a well-supplied warehouse that's got 6 items coming into it as raw materials. LA and San Diego, they'll almost run on autopilot here. We've got our trains running back and forth, and it's starting to look really good. So In fact, now it is so good, we're going to make sure it works. Because one of the things we're going to do now, it started out, remember, we started it, well, in other episodes, we started this one as automatic because we knew we weren't going to be able to get goods in there right away and we wanted to carry passengers. Well, now that's got to go because we need to haul freight because freight's how you grow your cities. So we're changing all these over to freight lines, first of all. So now we have four freight trains running back and forth between LA, the warehouse, and San Diego in the warehouse. And now we're looking at, okay, well, is four enough? And no, we're going to run eight. We're actually going to run 8 trains in that short little distance. But we're going to make sure that we have plenty of coverage and have trains running that will keep us keep all the supplies moving between those two cities so that both of them stay well supplied at all times. So now this area down here is looking really good. It's looking solid. And what I started to say a minute ago, at the beginning, I was looking around up there at Salt Lake City because we still need 2 more cities. We're going to grow our original 4, San Francisco, Shasta, Carson City, and Sacramento. We're going to grow these 2, LA and San Diego. But now, in order to really make that San Francisco to LA line pop, it would be great if, or I'm sorry, the Salt Lake City to San Francisco line, to really make that pop, it would be great if San Francisco was a bigger city. And so what we're going to do is our last 2 cities to grow are going to be Salt Lake City and Elko, because Elko is the nearest beer to complement Salt Lake City's meat industry. And Salt Lake City has a nice cattle farm nearby, providing it with cattle. So if we set up a line, beer meat line between Salt Lake City and Elko and supply wheat into Elko for the beer, and we've got their cattle coming in there for the meat in Salt Lake City. So now we can set up we're going to set up a pass-through warehouse between Salt Lake City and Elko. We'll have another beer meat line, and we'll be able to supply it. Now up here, the goods are kind of spread out. They're a long ways off, but everything's kind of flat and open up here. So even though it's a long distance, it's pretty easy track laying because it's all kind of flat ground. It's sort of out, sort of a plains kind of a geography, and so it'll be easy for us to build these nice long lines and run them into our warehouse. So everything's going to come from the east and north of us. So we're going to put in our we're going to use the bottom 2 platforms 3 and 4 in this case, to be our city to city lines, and we're going to have stations in both ends to match that. And I decided just go ahead now. I've got the money. I'm going to go ahead and do a large and use the middle 2 platforms from Elko to go over to my pass through, and then just save the other 2 just in case I need them for one on each side, just in case I need them to hook up another city or to do something else down the road. But right now the main thing is to get that pass through warehouse going, and once that's up and running, start to stock it with raw materials, and then of course set up our lines between Elko and Salt Lake City. And that would give us our original 4 plus the 2 city cluster with pass through down in LA, San Diego, plus this beer meat pass through up here, Elko to Salt Lake City. And that's going to give us the 8 that we're going to need to hit all of our goals. So now we're starting to load the raw materials into that warehouse, and I'm actually just looking around right here to figure out where these goods are going to come from and how I want to balance them out. And the one that's going to be a little funky for us actually is the milk. The milk is down here actually below the Grand Canyon, and I couldn't make myself go over the Grand Canyon. It seemed sacrilegious, so we're going to end up eventually running a big old long line. And here I'm being kind of cheap again. I'm going to take this connection bonus to Tucson, even though Tucson's just going to sit there. I'm not going to do anything with it. Obviously, if we had time, we'd come back and make a nice little Tucson to Yuma line, and we would run wheat over to maybe Yuma and put in a brewery and have ourselves another nice two-city cluster. But right now our focus is Salt Lake City and Elko. So we're setting up a log line into the warehouse, and that can just be a single train because it's such a nice short haul. But I am going to run it through both. Why did I do that? Oh, I'm running it through both because I'm actually going to use I believe I'm going to use track 1 on this side. Tell you the truth, I don't remember. It's been a little while since I've actually played this. Obviously, I'm doing a voiceover here after the fact. So I'm interested to see what I am going to do. Yep, we're going to be using track 1. In fact, so much so that I'm actually going to go, and this is totally unnecessary, but I'm actually going to delete the connection to track 2. And the reason you have both the connections is just to make that track 1 work in terms of getting that supply tower to hook up to the track correctly. So, and we're still running Philadelphia's at this point. I kind of have this thing, with the exceptions where I have to have it, I kind of like to run the same trains for my freight and then update them all at once. And so we're just still running Philadelphia, so it's worked just fine. We could have run them the whole time. So now we're going to run wheat to the warehouse, but we're also going to run wheat directly to our brewery in Elko. So, and the reason is, now, we didn't do that down in LA, San Diego, but ideally, the ideal scenario is to have that wheat go directly to your brewery to make sure that the brewery has enough wheat. But the main thing there is, if you do that, that takes pressure off your line that's running back and forth with the warehouse, and you're not just spending all your funds or all your capacity hauling more and more wheat into the city. If you keep it, the city that has the brewery, that is, if you keep it stocked with wheat from a direct line, now that frees up your city-to-city trains to gather other resources, logs and milk, etc., to bring into the city that happens to have the brewery. So that's the idea behind having that a dedicated line going to the city with the brewery. Even though you're running wheat into the warehouse. Now, the wheat in the warehouse, of course, is going to, in this case, it's primarily meant for Salt Lake City, but certainly if Elko needs it, when a train happens to come through there, that's fine too. Now, the other thing I did was I created that line that goes, an extra line that goes between the warehouse and Elko, a double track line, because I wanted to be able to hook into that, and because I might be able to reuse it for other goods that are coming in from the north and the east of us. So basically your corn and veggies, I forget what all is up there, are going to be coming in that way. We use our little Jan Jansen technique there to make sure that any trains I run can get out of there. And now I've got to check my track because I've done something wrong. What do I do wrong? Oh, I don't have my crossover yet, I don't think. Yeah, I'm missing the crossover to allow, there we go. Now I can run a train in there and run him back safely and soundly. And now we're going to do that same thing, hook up with that line that we built to run wheat directly into Elko, which is our brewery. And this one, for some reason, gets a little funky with the connection, but that's all right. It didn't like that terrain right there next to the track for some reason. Now you can see here how far we have to go to pick up the corn and the veggies, but that's okay. It's pretty flat, easy track to lay, and again, we're making a lot of money at this point. This would not be what I would think of as the ideal first cluster you'd want to build because it is expensive to run all this track in order to supply your warehouse. So this one is just one. We're doing this one mainly to build up Salt Lake City to make sure that we get our 2,000 passengers from Salt Lake City to San Francisco before we finish everything else. Because again, we're way ahead of schedule here and looking very, very good. But the one thing that could keep us from hitting that optional task, which is not a big deal, but if we're going to do this, we might as well get them all. And that being said, we've got to get that build up. If any building we can do in San Francisco only helps us get more passengers onto that line to San Francisco faster. So now we're setting up corn, big long line here, 400 miles. We're going 400 miles to give these people corn on the cob, and but it's worth it. Corn on the cob is a wonderful thing. So we're going to run corn, and we're also going to go up there and run veggies. And then we're going to run a long, funky milk line to go up there. And these guys will be in pretty good shape. These guys being Salt Lake City and Elko. Okay, now we're just going to go back and rinse and repeat by hooking up our we'll finish off the corn, then we'll rinse and repeat by hooking up our veggie line. So let's fast forward it just a little bit to the point where we're ready to start setting up the actual city-to-city line. Okay, so it doesn't do us much good to have all these goods in the warehouse if we're not moving them to the cities. So we're going to start setting up our line, and we're going to follow a pattern. Pick whatever pattern you like, but I like to think of it as left and right as I'm looking at the setup screen. And I do a pattern of left, 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 right, right, left, right, right. So, and I always start at the same city. So I always run 4 trains starting, like in this case, from Elko to Warehouse to Salt Lake City to Warehouse. I pick the left track in Elko, the left track in Salt Lake City, the left track in Elko, the right track in Salt Lake City, the right track in Elko, the left track in Salt Lake City, and the right track in Elko, the right track in Salt Lake City. And that way I get an even number of uses of the platforms on both ends. And generally speaking, I always do them in sets of 4. So this is the 4th one, I right to right. And I don't worry about, the numbers because they vary depending upon which tracks you use out of the stations. So that's why I like that left-right thing. And I'm just making sure they're all freight. And I did switch to the Dragon here. This is an important line, and I want to get this thing done, and we're going to look into switching everything to Dragon here soon. But want to make sure they're all freight. And now we're going to copy them. And as I've said before, if you're going to copy, make more, make sure you pick all 4 of them and then copy one after the other so that you're doing, keeping your distribution of platform use. And here you can see we're actually going to run 3 sets of 4. So we're running 12 trains. This is a long line. Going to run 12 trains. It turns out it's probably overkill, but I'd rather overkill as long as I don't make things congested. I would rather overkill and keep those supplies moving, because the supplies in the warehouse don't do you a lick of good, but the supplies in the cities do you a world of good, and that's where you get paid. So now we're going to look at that milk line. I think that's what comes next. Okay, you can see we're just in November of 1853, so we're in excellent shape on this stuff. And we're going around just checking our other city growth, and there's the Magic Elixir of City Growth, the museum in Sacramento. So that'll push it up to where it's growing. And we're also want to expand our distillery and make sure that we get that alcohol requirement done quickly. So we're going to repay a bond, and that's going to allow us to open up an even bigger bond. Now we've got plenty of money, and we can expand the distillery and bump it up to a level 4. So it's making over 5 a week now. So we've got one city that's grown at this point. That's, of course, Carson City. It's over 100. And that's because we did the focused growth on Carson City. We didn't try to build like other times we've done this 4-city cluster to grow all 4 or what have you. But now we're still got to run that milk. There's the Grand Canyon up there to the north and east of us. So I couldn't make myself go over it. It seemed like sacrilege. So I'm going to go around it. And we'll loop the line around the Grand Canyon, and then we'll go up here and realize, well, we don't have any bottom open slots for this milk, so we're actually going to loop it around Salt Lake City as well. So it's going to do 2 big loops, one around, well, kind of 3, one around the Grand Canyon, one around Salt Lake City, and one around the Great Salt Lake, which I think that's what that body of water there that looks salty, I think that represents the Great Salt Lake. Makes sense. Next to Salt Lake City, of course. So we just got to clean up this line so it'll work and then get it down to where it's a reasonable price. It's right now at $1.3 million to run milk into a warehouse. That's a pretty expensive milk line. Better be some really good milk. So we tighten it up a little, get it off that body of water down there, and then just clean it up as we go. Try to get the bridges out of it, the big humps, this unnecessary tunnel that went right through a mountain we could easily go around. Tighten up our bridge and get rid of that tunnel there. It's costing us a fortune. There, dropped all the way down there. That cleaned it up quite a bit. So down to under 600,000. So that's a lot, but to run milk. But you know, we need the growth. We need the supplies to come up here. And it doesn't quite like that tight little corner there in the merge, so this return line is going to have to loop out just a little bit. There we go. Put our signal on the other end, throw in our interim signals, run some supply towers, and start spamming out a few milk trains. That's a pretty long journey, so we're going to use a lot of trains there. Again, we're racing the clock now, not our budget. We're starting to pump money out at a nice clip, and I would say that the 12 trains, 8 would have done for our Elko to Salt Lake City, but again, the overkill doesn't hurt us. We just spent more money than we should have. So we're getting great growth now out of both sides as this thing takes off. So this pass-through warehouse is going to work great in Elko and Salt Lake City, and the one down LA San Diego is working great. So we're going to have to turn our attention now back to our original 4 and make sure they're all growing, because right now the only one that's really truly grown for us is Carson City, because we focused on it. We didn't do any kind of 2-city clusters or anything like that to get those going. So there you can see LA's at 91% growth, San Diego's at 89%, and we can put in a new industry. We're going to put a weaving industry because there's cotton close by. That'll be great because now the cotton can come down and help demand satisfaction in San Diego, and then the textiles can be sold in San Diego and then also shipped and sold to LA, which will help LA's demand satisfaction, so you get a win-win-win there. And we've got that line running into a platform in San Diego already that we're using as a pass-through for logs and milk, so we might as well go ahead and run our cotton in there and just let them go in, unload, and turn around and go right back. And we don't have enough volume of trains here on this line to worry about overcrowding. We're just running a few trains of each product, so it's not a problem. And right here, this terrain was a little difficult. It was hard to get this this merge line. The return line was fine, but this merge line just doesn't quite like that terrain and the elevation changes and the hill up there above the track. So we're going to have to let it kind of swing out just a little bit. In fact, I actually went back and said, okay, if I can't go one way, let's start the other way. So I go back to the other side, start and get it off, get it to exit the main track, and then I'm going to have to find a way to, there, I did a little loop to get it around the, whatever it was that was causing the problem, and then we'll run it back all the way up to cotton and run the cotton farm and run our cotton into San Diego to feed that textile mill. And now we're going to upgrade all of our freight trains to the Dragon. It has higher tractive power, just a little more speed than the Philadelphia. It's not the speed that matters, it's that traction, the tractive power, so it can pull these heavy freight loads. And so now we've got better freight running everywhere, all across the map. So we've got Dragons running all our freight. We've got Rensselaer's running our express lines between Salt Lake City and San Francisco, and LA and San Francisco. We're looking good. And if I didn't mention it before, the 12 trains here would probably overkill. 8 would have done it to run between these cities. But we are doing fine. Salt Lake City's at 96%. Elko just passed that 20,000 barrier, and it's at 99%, which is really 100%. They don't have 3 digits there. So we're giving those two about everything they can take right now, and looking good on that front. But the places where we need a bump now, here Shasta has needs a bump. It's down in the low 50s in satisfaction because we're not really running anything into Shasta. And by the way, we just finished our alcohol, so we're doing great there. And we've got a couple of cities that have hit our magic number. Carson City being one, I think Sacramento. Yep, Sacramento is the other one. And so we've got to build up San Francisco, and because San Francisco is way behind, it's only down in the 30s in population. But can you guess how we're going to do that? And if you guessed a pass-through warehouse, you win the prize. The prize is a hearty congratulations. But we're going to expand the warehouse in the station in San Francisco, and expand the station over here in Shasta. And then we're going to set up a pass-through warehouse, kind of centrally located between the two. And just to comment on that, it really doesn't matter. These pass-throughs just need to be in between the cities somewhere. They could be much closer to one city than the other. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the trains have to run kind of the same distance. And putting them in the middle maybe distributes the load a little better, but it doesn't really matter. I think you really want to make sure they're in between so that you can easily set up the lines city to city. But it's more important to get them where you can load up your resources. So the reason I picked this particular spot, it is centrally located between the two, and there's a lot of flat ground right around there, so that I can we can run lines in there without having too much trouble. If I tried to get it up too close to the river, it might actually make it difficult to hook up. So we wanted out there where we had some flat ground to work with. So this is going to be a good spot. Now this is going to be just like any other one that we set up. You've seen that in the rapid expansion strategy and pass-through video prior. You've seen it now. This will be the, what is it, 1, 2, this will be the third one we've set up on this particular run through. So I'm going to fast forward it because we've got quite a bit left, and I want to finish it all off on this particular video for this run through. So I'm going to fast forward it, and all you're going to miss, we're not going to miss anything, you're going to see it, but it's just going to be really fast. You're going to see us build out this pass-through warehouse and start to run supplies into it. Okay, so we're finishing off building out our trains, but we started building the lines and then realized I've got some trains held over I actually started modifying the lines. See, I'm modifying the existing line, and I'm saying don't do gold anymore. And that's an important distinction, because while that gold is great to ship and it makes you great money, it actually gets in the way of city growth. It's one of the reasons it's hard to grow San Francisco, because it gets a lot of gold in there and it doesn't get a lot of shipments of other stuff. So I want to say, yeah, we're going to skip on the gold. Let's do everything else. And because the goods, the other materials, the manufactured goods and the raw materials are much more important than the gold at this point. So I did have this one train there. I have this train here, I think it is. Yeah, it's full. And I didn't want to lose it, and it's down there in pretty good shape, ready to go in. So I wanted to let it run. and I'm just going to follow it in and delete it when it gets to the end. It seemed easier, but I'm going ahead and setting up my next set so that I'll have 8 trains running between these 2 cities. And there's that one. I'm just going to let him run. See, he's almost to San Francisco, so we're going to let him run all the way down. And when he gets into San Francisco and starts to and finishes unloading, then we'll delete him and say thank you for your service. There we go. Now we've got a nice clean line of freight trains running between Shasta and San Francisco. You may have noticed that corn line actually went around San Francisco right along the edge of the bay and came in from over there because the corn is coming down from the south. That was the only thing that was a little bit funky about running those goods in there. So now we've got an opportunity to put another industry in Salt Lake City. So we put a sawmill in there because we have logs. It's important. That was an important thing there, because if an investor had put something in there and it was something we couldn't supply easily, it could cost us a ton to supply it, or we'd have to buy it and replace it. By being able to put in the sawmill, we know we've got lumber right up there, abundant, right near our warehouse, so we can supply that one easily and keep the demand set up. And when I built the milk line, I'd mentioned in putting the towers on it, and apparently I forgot to actually do that. But there, I fixed that. And same thing here. We need more tower help, because these long lines, these 400-mile lines, they need more. They need supplies. So we're fixing that little error. There we go. So now these trains can get supplies and run efficiently. All right, at this point, we have really solid city growth all set, because we've got Carson City and Sacramento are already at our 80 plus. We've got the 2-city cluster, LA and San Diego. They're going to grow like crazy. We've got this one we're looking at up here, Elko and Salt Lake City. They both started as small cities, but they are growing fast. And of course, that Salt Lake City growth is helping us with our optional task of moving all those passengers from Salt Lake City to San Francisco. And we've also established a 2-city cluster with the pass-through warehouse, Shasta and San Francisco. They're our final pieces. So we've got 2 already. There's 3 2-city clusters with pass-through warehouses. That's going to give us our 8 cities. They're going to grow like crazy because we've got them set up with 6 resources in each of the warehouses, and they're manufacturing, and they're all beer. All 3 of them are beer meat runs, so they're helping each other grow. We're just going to watch the industry distribution and make sure that it's industries we want to see. And if we see something we don't like, we're going to buy the offender at a cheap price, I might add, because it'll typically be something that can't be supplied. And then we're going to replace it with something we do like and that we know we can supply. And so we're just going to keep rinsing and repeating with that. And we're really basically done at this point as far as the key things that we have to do to build. And what I'm doing right here is actually building a line. Where am I going with this one? I'm bringing cotton into Elko, because Elko now has a textile plant. So we're going to supply it directly with cotton. Again, it's a pretty long run. And again, I would say, this isn't, or where am I taking this one? I apologize. I'm actually taking it to the warehouse, and it'll work its way back to Elko, I guess. I could have run it directly into Elko. Frankly, that would have been smarter. But I had one space open in my warehouse because I realized there's just no sugar anywhere close by. I mean, and being a relative term, we're thinking of 400 miles is close, and there's no sugar within 400 miles. So I decided to just go ahead and use that spot and run the cotton in there. and we've got those trains running that moving goods back and forth like crazy, so everything's cool. So now here's one little thing we're going to do. We're going to throw in that university. That's a bonus task. So all right, we've got a university, and then of course we're going to immediately demolish the university and put in a museum. And the museum will be, of course, a monument to the history of the university that was there for so long. And so now we want to buy industries where we can and bump up their levels to keep their satisfaction up. It actually helps them grow. We put a museum in San Diego, so now we've got San Diego growing at 76%. San Diego will hit 80 like any day now. And we've got Shasta growing. We've got Sacramento's over 100 already. We know Carson City's up there. It's at 124,000. So San Francisco is getting over 70% demand satisfaction. And look at this, a ceramics work. How worthless is that? We're going to buy that one. And we're going to look to see what are they getting that they could use. And we're going to replace that ceramics work with something more useful. Something that we know we can supply. And this is what you really have to watch. Once you get your pass-through warehouses up, it's really on automatic because those things are so efficient. And you've got your goods coming into them, and you've got efficient movement of goods and raw materials. So we're going to put a weaver in here because we know we can run cotton down to a weaving industry or textile industry, whatever you want to call it. We actually bumped it up one, and now we're going to go out and grab a cotton industry and run it into San Francisco. So that this is very similar to, what we were talking about in the other ones. Once you supply the raw material directly to a city like this, then it takes care of demand satisfaction for the city, and it also takes care of that the good that they produce is used by the city, and then of course the good that it produces can be shipped to its sister city, its partner, if you will, in the two city cluster, so they get the benefit of it. And in fact, in this case, San Francisco can ship to Sacramento, it can ship to Shasta. So we're looking for a way to get into the city, and it turns out the best way is to just hook up with the cattle line that's already existing and let our cotton come in and share that line to go into San Francisco. And at this point, actually, we noticed that our meat industry in San Francisco has excess to export. If we had any place to go, if we wanted to build some more lines or whatever, or to expand this, we could run that meat out. It'd actually be really useful. We got all this excess meat. We could actually run it out and give it, in quotes, to other cities out there to help them grow. So go find a beer line out there like Winnemucca or something up the coast here, Gold Beach or something, and run that meat up there and start another line. But we're kind of running out of platforms and patience, frankly. I've been playing this one a long time, and it's time for it to be over. So we set up this cotton line, run it directly into San Francisco, and now we've got a textile industry in San Francisco that's going to have plenty of supplies. That's going to help with demand satisfaction. You know the drill. So we'll give it 3 trains, so it'll have plenty of cotton coming in. And what I was saying about the now we're going to set up the little Jan Jansen technique, these tight returns for the meat industry, so we can make sure that these returning cattle trains get up out of the way so that the cotton can go through and they don't hold one another up. Now we're going to pick up the Rogers American, and we're going to look at making it our express train for all of our express lines. And I'll rant about this in a different video, but I think there's a great opportunity for the developers to improve that functionality we just used. And I'll talk about that in a different time. So now we're checking our cities, 81% demand satisfaction over 60,000. We're looking great. We're up to 5 cities that are over 80,000. It's going to be a race really between Elko, it looks like. Because look at Salt Lake City's getting good growth and what have you. Elko started so small, but it's getting up there, and it's doing well. It's doing great. And look at that, another ceramics work. I mean, come on. I'm looking around to see, could we possibly use it? There's iron ore. The coal would be a long way off. And frankly, I don't want a ceramics work because it isn't going to help Salt Lake City. I want something that can have an immediate benefit for Salt Lake City. So we're going to buy that ceramics work. It's pretty cheap because it's not getting any supplies. And we're going to replace it with something that is useful, something that we know we can supply, and that's a dairy farm, because we know we've got that giant expensive milk run coming up to the warehouse, so why not use it and at least get some benefit out of it by building ourselves a dairy farm. And we're going to bump it up to level 2. And there I ended up buying the Tyson 10 wheeler. I didn't even want it. I thought I was expanding the dairy farm. But now we've expanded the dairy farm, and we're going to get milk out of the warehouse just fine. Now that milk can go back to Salt Lake City. Now Salt Lake City gets a museum. I think you see how this goes. These cities are just growing like crazy now. In fact, we just need to monitor them, monitor the industries, make sure the industries make sense and are ones that help us grow and we can supply. And also you can see here, even though we're running 12 trains and some of them are running with light loads, they're actually moving through pretty quickly. There's no big delays here, no big giant tie-ups. We've got a little bit of a line there for the supplies coming in, but it's no big deal. Everything's moving quickly and nicely, even with the breakdowns. We're looking good. And so I did notice that breakdown bad condition, so I'm going to go way back to the end of this line and set these two up with repairs on this end as well, so that these trains don't have to go so far until they get to a maintenance building. And that's a good practice, by the way, to set up maintenance, particularly on your longer lines, on your on your rural stations. And it takes some of the load off your warehouse, so you don't get these trains sitting in there being serviced and tying up a line in your warehouse. But we're getting great flow here, great growth, and that's just going to be the pattern the rest of the time. It's going to be watch the industries, put in the right industries, keep them supplied, and really it's always running on autopilot. So I really am going to kind of, this video is going to be way too long if I don't do this. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to near the end now. So hopefully you've gotten the idea and you understand the message of what's going on here. All right, so we're right near the end. We're just waiting for one last city, and there it comes. And we've been successful. Let's see how we did. So we got our 30, we got 10 out of 10, and we got 20 out of 20 on our time rating. Perfect score. Got a 1.5 multiplier, which gave us our 30 overall rating. The main thing there, of course, was to get that 20 out of 20 on the time. So I hope you've been able to see from this just how powerful a strategy the rapid expansion with the pass-through warehouses can be. And remember that method. Remember that early expansion, followed by the wheat cattle phase, where you feed all your beer and meat industries and make sure they stay strong to keep your economy moving, and then move into your pass-through warehouse stage, where you're building pass-through warehouses to help the growth. You set those up, you feed them, you set your lines, and you get that going. And then eventually you add your maintenance as the fourth step. So keep that in mind. Remember to use that. Remember that you have to kind of change it a little bit for each scenario, just like we did here. We ran that cattle to cattle from Shasta to Carson City because that's what our objectives forced us to do. But we stayed within that kind of that framework of the strategy all the way through this, and you can see what tremendous results we got. So hopefully this will be something that'll help, that you'll be able to take and apply to your gameplay, not just on Gold Rush, but on all the scenarios and campaign missions that you play. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.